Ivar was born unable to walk, so he could not become a real man.
Nobody else here is like you. You are destined for great things.
You're free to go. You're a free woman now.
However, the gods didn't completely abandon him. His wits began to shine against the English. When Æthelwulf thought he had found the Vikings' defensive loophole, he stepped into Ivar's trap. Facing the trap set by the Vikings, the English soldiers started to panic. Knowing that the enemy had laid a dragnet, they still rushed over without hesitation. The Vikings' arrows kept shooting at the English soldiers. Under the attack of Viking traps, bows, arrows, and kerosene, the English were completely passive. Æthelwulf roared in anger.
Come on and fight! You coward!
So, Ivar was galloping through the streets of York in his horse-drawn carriage. Although he killed the opponent, he was still surrounded by English soldiers. This is the closest the English have come to killing Ivar, but no one dares to kill him. During their indecision, Ubbi and Hvitserk led the Vikings to rescue. Both sides plunged into a melee, and probably only Heahmund among the English was the sober one. He used his strong fighting skills to charge at Ivar, but once the English engaged in close combat with the Vikings, it was difficult for them to win. With the intensity of the battle, deserters began to appear in the English ranks. Everyone else followed suit, and the battle eventually ended in defeat for the English. Although the Vikings won a big victory, there was internal disagreement. Ubbi believed that it was the best time for negotiations. He believes that they can not only claim more land at this time, but also free the Viking clansmen from endless wars. But Ivar rejected his idea directly. Ivar said that farming is not his pursuit. He thinks they should continue to attack. So, the brothers began to take different paths. In the night, Ubbi secretly woke up Hvitserk, and the two left York. They came to the English camp, ready to negotiate with Æthelwulf. However, they failed, and the two brothers had no option but to return to York dejectedly. Originally, Ubbi's status among the Vikings was not as high as Ivar's. After this humiliation, his prestige among the Vikings was even lower. At this time, Ivar didn't take his eldest brother seriously at all. He directly incited the Vikings to continue fighting. Seeing that the situation was over, Ubbi had no choice but to leave England and return to Kattegat. However, only 3 ships chose to leave with him. What he didn't expect was that at the last moment of departure, Hvitserk also betrayed him and chose to stay. Not long ago, Æthelwulf received news that Ubbi was leading a team to leave. Having been fooled once, he was unsure about how many Vikings there were left in York. So he planned to return to Wessex and gather more troops before attacking again. But he was stopped by Heahmund, who had thought of a perfect plan. He suggested using a siege to close all the roads of York and cut off the Vikings' food supply. Without food, the Vikings couldn't last long. Looking at it this way, this method was really good. Sure enough, in a few days, the Vikings faced a food crisis. They had to organize hunting parties to rely on hunting to solve the food problem, but as soon as they harvested their prey, they were ambushed by the English. No one from the hunting party survived. Hvitserk didn't see the hunting team return to the city for a long time, and he realized the seriousness of the problem. He asked Ivar what they should do next. Hvitserk stated that not only were they short of food, but there was also a plague spreading through the city. Their fighting strength was decreasing day by day, but Ivar didn't seem worried. Instead, he wondered if Hvitserk regretted staying. Hvitserk insisted that he didn't feel that way. He told Ivar that Ubbi used to order him around like a dog, but he was no one's dog. Hearing Hvitserk say this stirred Ivar's interest, so Hvitserk's words caused everyone to burst out laughing. Embarrassed, Hvitserk had no choice but to leave. It was clear that Ivar saw him in the same light as a dog. Meanwhile, there was good news from the English side. With the assistance of Judith, reinforcements from Northumbria arrived in Wessex. The English were once again ready to fight. According to the scouts, the Vikings were burning bodies all over York, indicating that their numbers had significantly decreased. Ethelwulf immediately decided to attack, but he was stopped again by Heahmund. He thought they should wait a little longer for the Vikings to lose their fighting spirit completely. Heahmund repeatedly went against his decision, which enraged Ethelwulf. Seeing this, Heahmund immediately dropped to his knees to show his loyalty. At this moment, smoke was swirling in York, and it turned out that the so-called burning of bodies was deliberately done by Ivar. Hvitserk asked him the purpose of doing this, but Ivar didn't tell him. This was part of Ivar's plan. Soon, Ethelwulf got the news. The soldiers told him that the Vikings and their ships were all missing. They must have escaped. So Ethelwulf led the English army once again into York. As expected, the place was deserted. When Heahmund opened the doors of the church, he only saw a few war horses and rats all over the ground. Heahmund took a few steps back, seeming to realize something, but he didn't understand why the rats were above ground. When they saw that the Vikings had gone, everyone was very excited. The long-lost ringing of the church bells rang out again. But at that moment, the number of rats on the ground started to increase. It turned out that the Vikings hadn't left but had hidden underground. Hearing the cheers of the English, Ivar thought the time was ripe. So, the Vikings emerged from various well openings, throwing the English into chaos instantly. The Vikings, under Ivar's command, launched a counterattack. The English were caught off guard and slaughtered by the Vikings. Heahmund also joined the battle on horseback, trying to boost morale, but to no avail. In the face of the fierce Vikings, the English were brutally killed. No matter how Heahmund swung his weapon, he seemed unable to stop the Vikings. Things were not looking good for Ethelwulf either, as he had been noticed by Hvitserk. Fortunately, he still had loyal soldiers around him who rushed to block the damage for the king. At that moment, a berserker wielding a giant hammer charged at Alfred. However, a general from Northumbria helped him against the berserker in the critical moment. Even though the two of them severely injured the Viking warrior, the general was killed by the berserker in the last moment. Heahmund was also surrounded, and he faced Ivar. Despite this, Heahmund did not back down. He began to continuously kill the enemies around him. Even though he was strong, he could not withstand being surrounded.
Geef de horen om hesting in!
In the end, Heahmund was captured. Ethelwulf was also forced to retreat from the battlefield. Their resistance seemed to have done little to change the course of the battle. After the major battle, the English suffered a bad defeat and seemed unlikely to recover their fighting strength in the short term. They had no choice but to return to Wessex to recuperate and wait for an opportunity. After receiving the news that the English were leaving, Ivar planned to leave some of his people behind and lead his team back to northern Europe. After all, after defeating the English, he needed to plan on how to seize the Nordic throne and avenge his mother's death. Since leaving England, Bjorn's fleet had arrived in the Bay of Cadiz in Spain. A familiar face appeared beside him, Sinric. He advised Bjorn that it would be wisest to disguise themselves as traders and enter the city, so they had to send back most of the ships and just keep 3. After all, where they were going was a dangerous place. The next day they arrived at the Strait of Gibraltar. A giant mountain stood by the coastline. This was the Pillar of Hercules. Bjorn expressed his desire to go to Rome. In his mind, Rome was the center of the New World, but Sinric cut him off, saying that the world had greatly changed since maps were drawn. The times of the Roman Empire had passed. However, not far from here was a wonderful island, Sicily, so they headed straight there. The ruler of this place, Euphemius, was very wary of Vikings, but when he learned that Bjorn only brought 3 ships, he was ready to attack them. In the end, Euphemius was directly subdued by Bjorn, creating an awkward atmosphere. Euphemius had no choice but to break the tension with laughter. After seeing Bjorn's skills, he treated them hospitably. Not only that, he also wanted to hire Bjorn as his bodyguard. After some consideration, Bjorn agreed directly. Following this, They began to live the life of keeping Euphemius safe. But Sicily wasn't as simple as it appeared on the surface. Euphemius was actually just a puppet. The real power behind him was an Arab named Ziyadat. Bjorn proposed to meet Ziyadat, but Euphemius was initially against it. However, a holy woman named Cassia expressed her desire to go, and with just a single sentence, she changed Euphemius's attitude. With that, everyone embarked on their journey. Halfdan was particularly curious about this woman. After traveling across the sea and desert, the group finally met Ziyadat. Surprisingly, Ziyadat could speak the Viking language, and he even warmly welcomed them.
This one is for you.
After everyone had rested, Halfdan told Bjorn that the person who was with him wasn't a woman. Just as everyone was remarking that Ziyadat was a good person, Euphemius's men were caught. Ziyadat claimed that they were preparing to escape with Euphemius in the middle of the night. In front of Bjorn, he executed these men, which made Bjorn and Halfdan feel uneasy. What further aroused their suspicions was Euphemius's disappearance. However, at this time, Euphemius hadn't run away. Instead, he was about to become a delicacy at their dining table. Amid the melodious strumming of a lute, Bjorn tasted this exotic cuisine. They did not realize the gravity of the situation until Ziyadat revealed the ingredients of the dish.
Return to the Emperor's favor.
The next day, Ziyadat really attacked Bjorn's group of people. Coincidentally, a massive sandstorm was approaching. Taking advantage of the chaos, Bjorn managed to flee.
The consequences of Ragnar's death are not yet played out. You have only seen the beginning of the end. So now prepare yourself for what is to come.
When Ubba returned to Kattegat, he decided to ally with Lagertha. After all, he had fallen into this dire situation because of Ivar, and Lagertha also had to deal with Harald, but she didn't know that Astrid was already planning to marry Harald. During the wedding, Astrid's mind was constantly filled with memories of being with Lagertha.
For although the fetters of marriage will be invisible.
Meanwhile, in England, Ivar had Heahmund imprisoned. They began discussing their respective faiths, reminiscent of when Ragnar first met Athelstan. However, unlike Athelstan, Heahmund's faith was quite steadfast. He would never capitulate to pagans. But in Ivar's eyes, Heahmund was also a pagan. It wasn't long before Ivar learned of Ethelwulf's retreat. This made him realize that the war in England had come to an end. So he planned to return to the Nordic region, as the most pressing matter now was the situation there. He had never forgotten the vengeance for his mother's death. Soon, Ivar returned with a large army, accompanied by Heahmund. However, they did not return to Kattegat, but instead arrived directly in Harald's territory. After all, he had fallen out with Ubbi, and Kattegat was a place he couldn't go back to for the time being. Harald wasn't surprised by his arrival. He said that he also planned to attack Lagertha in due course. Although the two shared the same goal, they had their own plans. In the Battle of York, Ivar had seen Heahmund's strength. Now he needs strong help, so he plans to convince Heahmund to fight for him. Threats were ineffective on Heahmund, for he could sacrifice himself for his faith. So, Ivar told Heahmund that those he asked him to kill were pagans, not Christians. Upon hearing this, Heahmund compromised. During the banquet, Ivar and Harald agreed on a time to attack Kattegat, but Astrid was always preoccupied. She still had Lagertha in her heart. Floki returned to Kattegat, and Lagertha was very happy to see him. However, Floki seemed to be obsessed with the gods he saw on the island. He even wanted to take some people from Kattegat with him to enjoy the protection of the gods. But in Lagertha's eyes, this decision was tantamount to betrayal. She was very aware that Kattegat could be attacked by Harald at any moment. If Floki were to take away the warriors here, it would be like taking away her hope. He told everyone about his extraordinary experience in Iceland, and surprisingly, a group of people actually agreed to follow him. Just as they were packing up and preparing to leave, Lagertha arrived with her men, but facing her old friend, forcibly keeping them back, seemed to be pointless. So, Lagertha ultimately chose to let them go. She turned around and mounted her horse lonely. Lagertha felt lonely at this moment. Fortunately, there was still one person whom she could trust, and that was Astrid. Ivar and Harald decided to attack Kattegat 2 months later. Astrid, who was already married to Harald, still couldn't let go of Lagertha, so she decided to tell Lagertha the news, but she couldn't leave here herself. The next day, she found a whaler. After some conversation, she learned that a whaling ship could reach Kattegat in about 2 days. Moreover, the crew members were all family of the whaler, so they could be trusted. Astrid planned to ask him for help and promised a hefty reward. Looking at the valuable jewelry, the whaler readily accepted the task. But when Astrid was about to leave, he stopped her. He expressed his desire to be with her. After all, who wouldn't want to be with a queen? Upon hearing this, Astrid rejected him outright and immediately turned to leave. After she left, all she had in mind was Lagertha's image. So she made a decision she would regret for the rest of her life. She agreed to the whaler's unreasonable demand. Astrid thought that everything would end soon, but unexpectedly, 3 other men entered. Astrid tried to escape, but they forcefully stopped her. Being a shield maiden, she fiercely resisted, but the words of the whaler made her give up resistance instantly, because the whaler threatened to tell King Harald about this if she didn't comply. For Lagertha, she finally compromised. The whaler kept his promise and went to Kattegat to find Lagertha. He relayed to Lagertha the news of Ivar and Harald's planned joint attack. This wasn't a good thing for Kattegat. A fierce battle was inevitably coming. Lagertha immediately ordered everyone to start preparing. Ubi was to inform the lords to rally their armies, and Torvi was in charge of tightening security. After everyone departed, Lagertha suddenly called back Margreta. It turns out that she has been instigating everyone to rebel against Lagertha behind her back. So, Lagertha warned her that if she kept doing these things, she would demote her to a slave.
And as long as I rule here.
Soon, Bjorn returned. The tribe was elated to see Bjorn return, as if they had seen their savior. Bjorn noticed many Sami people in the street and was curious about the motives of these foreign tribes. Lagertha told him the current situation, and these Sami people were the reinforcements she invited. It was perfect timing for Bjorn's return, as Ivar's group was planning to attack at the next full moon. Afterwards, Lagertha introduced him to the king and princess of the Sami people. Bjorn and the princess were attracted to each other at first sight. Torvi noticed this and didn't look too pleased. After the introductions, they all started to enjoy the feast. Lagertha expressed her doubt about Halfdan's stance, fearing that he might switch sides. After all, he was Harald's own brother. Halfdan clearly told Lagertha that Bjorn had saved his life, and he had sworn to serve him. Only after getting confirmation from Bjorn did Lagertha let herself relax. However, for the rest of the evening, Bjorn's gaze was focused on Princess Snæfrid. Torvi sensed that Bjorn was no longer in love with her. All she hoped for was that Bjorn would take good care of their child. But deep down, Torvi couldn't accept Bjorn's change of heart and left in sorrow. Just after Torvi left, Bjorn told Lagertha that he wanted to be with Princess Snæfrid. From the first time they met, Princess Snæfrid declared to her father that she must marry Bjorn, and Bjorn went straight to the king of the Sami's tent. Who would have thought that the apparently gentle Princess Snæfrid was actually so wild and private? She used ropes to tie Bjorn up. It can be seen that this is the first time for Bjorn to encounter this novel experience, and there is a trace of expectation in his nervous expression. He lay still on the bed as the princess was describing the Sami tradition of castration of domesticated reindeer. At this time, Torvi was still hoping for the mercy of the god of love. She was crying outside when Ubi happened upon her. He stepped forward to comfort Torvi, and then he couldn't help but kiss her. Ivar pulled Heahmund into the square, forcing him to make a final decision. Either join his army to attack Lagertha or die here today. After a moment of hesitation, Heahmund picked up a dagger, ready to commit suicide. Then a Viking stepped up to Heahmund, provoking him. As a result, Heahmund ended the Viking's life with his own dagger. He finally made the decision to join Ivar's army. After being defeated at the Battle of York, Æthelwulf led his remaining forces back to Wessex. Looking at the cross, he didn't want to run away anymore, so he planned to rebuild this place. Alfred came to King Ecgbert's tomb, recalling what King Ecgbert had pursued in his lifetime. He was filled with emotions for a moment and immediately vowed that one day he would restore the glory of King Ecgbert. But not long after, Alfred fell ill once again. Fortunately, Judith was there to take care of him. After recovering from the illness, he prepared to conduct a spiritual practice. He's going to the monastery where Athelstan was, to follow in his father's footsteps. Meanwhile, Æthelwulf was at the training ground proudly watching his sons practice. Before long, Alfred arrived at the monastery where his father, Athelstan, had once resided. He heard many stories about his father. This journey gave him many new insights. He realized that if he wanted to effectively resist Viking aggression, he had to create his own navy. This would keep the enemy out of the country. After a period of recuperation, Wessex's power somewhat recovered, and King Æthelwulf grew a lot during this time. At the nobles' council, he discussed his views on the Vikings. The Vikings now were no longer simply robbers. They were desirous of fertile lands. The occupation of York was only a beginning. In the future, they would definitely organize a more robust army, and England was about to face a threat as never before. After the council, Ethelwulf went to the study to read. A bee landed on his book, and he was stung by the bee on his hand. Looking at the stung palm, Ethelwulf fell into despair.